Thank you, and welcome to the sixth session of this webinar series. In this one, we'll be looking at the decisions that you need to make when buying informatics products. The list of informatics products is growing as vendors understand the potential for coupling information technology and instrumentation systems. In this session, we'll look at the issues that need to be addressed when purchasing products such as laboratory information management systems, electronic laboratory notebooks, scientific data management systems, and instrument data management systems. As the field develops, more technologies and products are expected to be added, but the considerations we'll be talking about here should be applicable to those as well. In an earlier session in this series, we looked at the same four basic categories of informatics products in terms of their origins and development. As noted on the chart, the introduction of key technologies spans a period of almost 30 years from their initial introduction and continued development. Since their introduction, these technologies have borrowed capabilities from each other in order to remain competitive and attractive to customers in the marketplace. As a result, the field of informatics and laboratory work has become confused as many product technologies address the same laboratory needs in different ways. Those include document management, experiment execution, record keeping, sample tracking, collecting data from instruments in real time. The items shown on the right-hand side of the screen are basically the list of bullets. The methods of addressing functions may be significant in your applications. For example, in the application of laboratory execution systems, we have choices of carefully developed and specialized applications that need integration with other systems, and as an alternative, scripting capabilities that offer easier integration at the cost of the user doing the script development. We're going to cover these systems very briefly since they've been covered in more depth in previous sessions. In order to make sense of the capabilities that are available to you, we have to first look at the laboratory functions that these products and technologies address. There are two basic sets of capabilities, and laboratories need to take a look at them. This is the first one and concerns management of the lab itself and how work gets done. We need to address issues of personnel resources and relationships to other groups, as well as the management work itself. And that includes the ability to schedule work, keep track of samples and their status and location, generating work lists, and keeping careful records, reports, and protecting intellectual property. In most laboratories today, regulatory requirements is a significant issue and needs to be carefully addressed. The second major function that laboratories look at is the actual execution of the work that they do. This includes method development, and with that, all the documentation, training, and validation for those methods. In addition, we have the ability to record observations as part of experimental work, experiment and method execution, data analysis, and then reporting the results of that work. Making intelligent buying decisions means looking at these two maps of work and determining what informatics products can be used to support the work in your laboratory. In order to make those connections, we need to carefully evaluate what it is you want to accomplish, and then take a look at the technologies and their applications and see how they fit the needs in your lab. The next thing we're considering in this webinar series are looking at a number of points that need to be addressed in order to make sure that the implementation of products and technologies you select will be successful. The final piece of the puzzle is looking at the purchase process itself and the questions and issues that need to be addressed before you sign the purchase orders. In terms of what you want to accomplish, a lot depends on understanding your laboratories and what its needs are, where it's going in terms of future development, and the type of laboratory you're managing. On the upper right-hand portion of the screen, you'll see some typical reasons for getting involved with lab technologies. These include everything from streamlining operations and improving productivity to better data management and improving the work environment. It's really a matter of determining what problems you want to solve. That might seem like a fairly simple issue to identify, but there are often secondary issues that come to light once you start addressing the primary points. For example, better data management involves a real study of how you're using data and who needs access to it, and how that access will be provided. Adding new capabilities often involves new equipment and training. Finding the right solution for your laboratory with informatics products may mean purchasing several different tools to meet your goals. The real work comes in laying out a plan to determine what you need and what elements you're going to satisfy those needs with. It comes down to planning, but you've heard that before in the series. What technologies you use and how you use them is going to vary depending upon the type of lab work you're dealing with. Management map that we've been using as a guide in this webinar series. I'll be focusing on the technologies in the informatics section. While the points we'll be discussing don't explicitly appear in the map, there are actually sub-levels of the management issues section. As the development of elements of laboratory technology management program proceed, we'll see the map adding levels of detail and connections between those levels. The overall subject of technology planning and lab automation covers several disciplines, so this increasing complexity is expected. This chart shows the development of instrument data systems from their inception in the 1960s to their development today in chromatographic data systems, for example, and systems for supporting other techniques. For much of that time, instrument data systems were focused on data collection, analysis, and reporting. But as vendors saw opportunities to expand their capabilities, they made them more attractive to the marketplace. They added sample management facilities, for example. The system development has progressed from integrators and computer systems supporting single instruments on the lab bench to client-server systems that support multiple instruments and users. The goal was to reduce the amount of work lab staff had to do in sample analysis and improve the analytical capabilities of equipment, providing faster and more accurate calculations with the ability to handle more complex analysis than could be done by people and still be cost-effective. At this point, we want to introduce this chart as a means of comparing the application and capabilities of different laboratory informatics products and technologies. We're going to look at things on the basis of two characteristics: sample volume and the flexibility built into the technology. By flexibility, we mean the ability to make changes to the system, to customize it to meet your laboratory's work requirements, and handling changes in the way your work gets done. Note that both these scales are relative. There are no hard numbers, and how you interpret them depends on the activities that are going on in your lab. Instrument data systems, by their design, are narrowly focused on specific techniques and technologies. They can be used to analyze a single sample or thousands of samples depending on the structure of the product's design and database. If the laboratory is predominantly dealing with a single technique and a client-server, multi-user, multi-instrument system, that system may satisfy the majority of the informatics needs for that lab. The only issue is that there's going to be very little flexibility in customizing and tailoring the system to meet a wider spectrum of lab management requirements. If you're evaluating these systems, you need to take a look at what it is you want to accomplish and how much flexibility is required. One of the trade-offs you might consider are modifications to the existing data system versus adding a laboratory notebook system to take care of the features that the IDS isn't capable of supplying. System capability is going to vary widely from one vendor to another. The next systems that we're going to look at are laboratory information management systems and electronic laboratory notebooks. People are still asking questions about which ones are appropriate for their applications. These products are designed to address different issues. LIMS are designed to support a process that includes sample tracking, work management, and results reporting. Electronic laboratory notebooks are designed primarily as document and record-keeping systems. The development of LIMS began in the late 1970s and was primarily focused on sample tracking, replacing manual work that had been done using logbooks. Since then, in response to customer requirements and perceived competitive pressures, additional features such as instrument data capture, document management, and most recently text execution scripting have been added. When we look at our chart, the LIMS is at a higher level of flexibility than the instrument data system, since it can be used to support a wider variety of techniques and provides a lot more facilities for customization. You can interface balances, pH meters, and a wide variety of devices, many of which are supported directly by the vendor. In terms of sample volume, the LIMS would come in at a later point than the instrument data systems. The cost of the software and hardware requires a higher level of samples to justify implementation. Once it's implemented, the LIMS would take over a lot of the capabilities that a client-server instrument data system might offer. The idea is to consolidate information management as much as possible and reduce unnecessary duplication. Electronic laboratory notebooks were first designed as record-keeping systems based on the model of paper notebooks that people have been using for generations. Since then, they've developed additional capabilities and support instrument data capture, discipline-specific features in biology, chemistry, and so on, as well as variations that are focused on experiment and text execution. Electronic laboratory notebooks show a high level of flexibility in laboratory applications because the structure of their data systems is up to the user, as well as the nature of the elements that can be added, including images, audio, video, in addition to charts and text and other records. However, because of this flexibility, there's a limit to the number of samples you're going to process directly in an electronic laboratory notebook, since sample processing implies more comprehensive data structure to take into account the status of samples and results. Once you reach a limiting threshold, you may invest in a data system for sample processing and management with the results stored in the notebook for research and further analysis. In laboratories where a large volume of samples is being processed and those samples need to be used in a wider variety of testing protocols that can be supported by an instrument data system, you may want to use a LIMS as an intermediate step between sample analysis, results management, and work management, with the final results being put in the electronic laboratory notebook. As we've noted in other sessions, there are a lot of variations on system usage, and you have to pick the one that suits your needs the best. A variation on the electronic laboratory notebook that has been developed over the past few years are laboratory execution systems. These are available as standalone systems and as scripting facilities that are part of some vendors' LIMS. The purpose of a laboratory execution system is to guide the analyst in the steps needed to complete a standard operating procedure, making checks on equipment and reagents, and ensuring as much as possible that the process is conducted with calibrated equipment, certified reagents, and qualified personnel. As originally conceived, the system would focus on an individual carrying out a particular test, and as a result be used for a smaller volume of samples, depending on the number of samples that the analyst can process in one session. Some implementations of execution systems can accept input from instruments. Others have direct access to database facilities within a laboratory information management system. However, there's no reason why we can't change the nature of the standard operating procedures to work in a fully automated laboratory. Instead of focusing on the execution of a test for a small number of samples, the standard operating procedure could be used to guide the analyst in the setup and maintenance of a complex analysis train that included automated sample preparation, data analysis, screening results for outliers, and reporting on the final test results. It largely depends upon the definition of standard operating procedure. This would provide a useful transition as we move from manual text execution to automated execution. The last type of technology we want to look at is that of scientific data management systems. These originally began as record-keeping facilities, which quickly incorporated data capture and then later document management. The placement of SDMS on this chart shows a wide range of capabilities in terms of both flexibility and handling sample volumes. This is because the structure of an SDMS is flexible and dependent upon the user's development and application. The same system can be used to bring in data from a balance or an instrument data system. It can also be used as a flexible data system to support and consolidate laboratory data that doesn't conveniently fit in other types of informatics products. So it may bring in information from an instrument data system that doesn't fit in a laboratory information management system. It can also act as a transfer mechanism of information into an electronic laboratory notebook. Products with high levels of flexibility require a lot more thought on the part of lab staff to determine exactly how they might be applied and how they might complement other types of informatics products. In order to make sense of all this for your laboratory, we need to go back to basics and really determine what it is you want to accomplish in order to figure out how we can apply the products to your laboratory's needs. This placement of products and technologies against work requirements is just a suggestion and gives you some idea of how products alone and in combination might be used. The application and use of these technologies is going to vary widely depending upon the type of laboratory you're dealing with. So that's the next point we'll take a look at. This matrix matches the technologies we've just looked at with different types of laboratory situations, including research laboratories, labs that do testing in support of research, traditional quality control, and independent testing or contract laboratories. The words on the chart are vague because even these four category classes cover a wide range of capabilities and requirements, and the nature of the work that goes into a specific type of laboratory can vary widely. It isn't until you look at a specific type of lab environment that you can make more solid recommendations. Your job is to look at your lab's needs and planning requirements and make more concrete recommendations on how products are going to be used. In research applications, the most likely informatics products is the electronic laboratory notebook, with input from instrument data systems and potentially using a scientific data management system as a means for collecting and organizing laboratory data and documents. Unless laboratories are doing high-volume testing in support of the research, laboratory information management systems are less likely to be useful. If the workload supports the need for LIMS, then the need might be satisfied by a smaller, less robust open source product than the typical commercially available system. It's a matter of balancing cost versus need. In specialized applications, such as high-throughput screening, the screening system may provide all the sample management functionality that's needed. Testing laboratories that support research work and whose workload includes method development, routine and non-routine testing, as well as their own research work, are very likely to need informatics products that span the four technologies we've looked at. Instrument data systems are almost a given, unless there's something about the testing that precludes them, such as testing on humans or animals. Scientific data management systems are useful as a means of aggregating a wide range of inputs from instruments. They may represent an intermediate step in providing integration between instruments and laboratory information management systems or notebooks. Electronic laboratory notebooks are useful for documenting the process of method development, as well as the process for supporting routine testing. In testing method development, an ELN could be a mandatory requirement to provide the necessary documentation needed for validation and also for managing intellectual property. Laboratory information management systems provide a useful means of managing both routine and non-routine testing, and also managing changes in work priorities that are likely to crop up in support of research, and also handling manufacturing problems that can't or shouldn't be addressed by QC. Giving outside groups limited access to a LIMS to check sample status can be useful, since it would relieve lab staff from dealing with questions about work and when work is likely to get done. However, the level of access has to be carefully considered to prevent people from having the ability to view intermediate results before they've been reviewed and approved. Having sample submitters enter information about sample and work requests can ease the administrative workload, but you have to put safeguards in place against abuse, including creating work requests and then delaying the arrival of samples in the lab or forgetting to cancel unnecessary tests. Given the similarities between research testing and quality control, you might expect that the informatics usage would be very similar. However, there are differences, and those differences are significant, at least in terms of the work that we are considering. Research testing laboratories are more likely to have variations in the type of work that they're doing. Some test protocols may be run frequently, others rarely. What they do is going to depend upon the priorities of test programs and the need to support research as well as urgent requests. There's also priority issues that have to be managed, although many sample submitters automatically assign everything a high priority. Quality control will most likely be running the same test day after day, with little change in schedule unless something unexpected occurs. Because of the predictability of their work, automation here can be very profitably applied, and it's because of this potential for high levels of automation that differences between informatics usage and research testing and quality control exists. We'll look at the development of laboratory information management systems as a way of illustrating the point. Before the introduction of laboratory information management systems, the work involved in keeping track of samples and testing requirements was performed using logbooks, paper-based systems. Usually one person was given the responsibility for logging samples and keeping track of the work that had to get done. The analyst would consult the logbook for specific types of tests and then gather the samples, carry out the analysis, and then update the logbooks to show that the work was completed. LIMS were introduced as a response to the amount of work that people had to do to keep track of samples and work lists. They were designed to support a process, and over time their functionality increased to better support the laboratory's operations. These systems were predicated on the fact that they would be supporting work done by people, and that people's requests for information and managing operations. If we move to a high level of automation, a lot of that functionality isn't necessary. Consider a facility that uses a high level of automated and inline testing in support of manufacturing. Rather than having samples collected manually, the system automatically samples the production stream for testing. Process chromatographs have been doing this for decades, and inline and online analyzers are continually under development. The sample's identification may be a timestamp of when the sample was taken, or if it's put in a container using a barcode to identify it. Once the sample is taken, the system is verified to confirm that it's working properly, and the measurements taken, and the results are logged and sent to wherever they need to be recorded to support product quality and production operations. With little human involvement, the need for LIMS isn't there. What is really needed is a sophisticated data logging system to keep track of samples, confirmation of a fully functioning system, and the results of the analysis. As a result, there's going to be an evolution in informatics as we incorporate automation into the testing process. A LIMS may only manage a portion of the work, with samples submitted and logged on a scheduled basis. Because of the routine nature of process management testing, some functions common to LIMS simply may not be needed. QC labs that have a high percentage of manual testing may need a LIMS to manage the workload and results. In either case, a LIMS may be needed as a basis for issuing certificates of analysis and to release products for shipping. Independent testing laboratories behave very much like research testing facilities, and as a result, a laboratory information management system is mandatory to keep track of the testing needs of a variety of customers requesting a variety of tests. Other informatics technologies are likely to be used, but a LIMS would be the centerpiece of the operations. Now we want to move on to points that need to be considered as part of the development of systems requirements and considerations for technology purchases. The items on the screen will give you an outline of the material you want to cover in the next few slides. One area that is getting increasing attention is the use of tablet systems as a means of people interacting with laboratory informatics. Tablets provide a lot of capability, and how much use it is depends on how your lab works. The use of tablets can free up bench space, and the mobile access can make it a lot easier for people to work and make better use of their time, keeping track of experiments and looking up information anywhere they happen to be. Corporate policies for remote access need to be reviewed to determine how much wireless access is permitted. In addition, the tablets can be used for image capture if that's an important feature in your lab's work, and to dictate notes instead of typing them in. Tablets as a means of gathering data in the field and working with living organisms has a benefit, with the collected information uploaded remotely or back in the office. If these are functions that are important to you, you may have to make some considerations about the type of technology implementation that you use. Your labs will have to have the infrastructure necessary to support secure wireless access. There have been sporadic reports about wireless systems interacting with laboratory instrumentation. Although vendors take pains to make sure their equipment meets current standards and specifications to avoid electronic interference, it's always a potential problem with older equipment. Significant consideration is the type of tech support that's available to you. Will you be relying on the vendor to provide the technical and backup support you need? Will you have access to an internal IT group, either one that's part of the laboratory or using corporate support to provide the support that's required? Or are you going to be using third-party contractors to provide that necessary support? The answer to those questions may affect the technology choices that you make. For example, if you're using a software as a service model for informatics, will this impact your ability to make instrument connections? Your planning for this point needs to be made on the worst case conditions, not the ideal solution. What is technically possible may fail in real work situations, where the reliable power and communication services can be an issue. Are support groups part of the specification and purchase process? They may have needs and considerations about support requirements and policies that are critical to long-term success. Another consideration is corporate policy conflicts. They could include company-wide standardization on database products and operating systems. If you're using third-party support, what is their commitment to you? If your interest in support from a particular company is based on the experience of a few individuals, what happens if they leave the company? Are there compatibility issues with systems you currently have in place? Are you looking at brand new purchases, an upgrade, or are you looking to replace an existing system? What considerations need to be taken into account to transition from the systems you currently have or the method of operations you're currently using to whatever will be in place when the new system is put in operations? We've mentioned the concept of virtualization in computer systems in previous sessions. As long as the functions of the software aren't compromised by virtualization, a virtual system container can be used to evaluate the new system. Making a virtualized copy of the new system as it's installed will give you an opportunity to do some training. Once it's ready up and running, you make a virtualized copy of the existing system just prior to putting new software into production, and that would provide you a backup in case of problems or in case you need to access historical information. The most critical part of the purchase process is the lab staff. Are they ready and really on board with what you're trying to accomplish? You need to take time to talk to them, to get their input, and educate them so that they're part of the process. That education needs to begin before you write the purchase orders. It's not a case of we'll train them on the product when it's installed. They need to be trained in the technology so they can be an important part of making technology decisions. The first thing you need to understand is what all of the lab's needs are and how you want the laboratory to work in the future. That means avoiding thinking in terms of products, but rather thinking in terms of functions and capability. You need to evaluate products in terms of their ability to satisfy those needs. When you consider informatics systems, you have to think about how often and how long you'll need to get access to your data. What are your archiving requirements going to be? Another consideration is the vendor's track record. How long do you expect them to be in business? If they are a new vendor with new technology, do they have the management structure and financial backing necessary to make sure they can be successful in the long term? What happens if they drop the product, merge with a competitor, or go out of business? Will you have the resources will you have the considerable resources necessary to bring a product into your laboratory and put it to work? You need to make sure that the vendor is going to be there to support you for the long term. No matter how stable a vendor is at some point, you're going to be dealing with product changes through upgrades or replacement. Do you have a data migration strategy in place to support that? The time to consider that point is when you're considering products for purchase. That's when the vendor is going to be most receptive to your concerns. Now we're going to turn our attention to a subject that pops up occasionally, particularly in large companies, and that is whether or not to buy a product or to build it. This issue first came to light when hospitals were considering the implementation of laboratory information management systems, the equivalent of the industrial laboratory information management system. They were wondering whether or not to build or buy a system and which one was a better approach. The hospital study came to a conclusion that at best, an in-house developed system might be equivalent to a commercial system in terms of capability only for a short time, after which it will quickly fall behind. The same questions surfaced in the early 1980s when laboratory information management systems became popular, and again the question of build or buy was raised. As in the hospital case, the decisions favored buying products rather than building them. Support issues, keeping products current with commercial systems, and other factors led to that position. We are seeing the issue come to light again with the introduction of electronic laboratory notebooks. The reasons are that there's very broad interest in electronic laboratory notebooks. The systems can affect a lot of laboratories, not just testing laboratories, which were the focus of LIMS. There is a potential for a higher number of installations, and as a result, an economy of scale. In addition, corporations see the information stored in ELNs as a valued source of intellectual property that they want to have continued access to, with the ability to search, use, and organize on a corporate basis rather than just the laboratory by laboratory situation. Small and medium-sized companies should avoid the temptation to build informatics products. They often underestimate the level of effort and the cost in the development process, and you'll get better support and quality and functionality from commercial vendors than you're likely to produce on your own. Large companies might consider a project like this, but there are a number of considerations that they need to take into account. For example, can the laboratories agree on the functional requirements? This is a major issue. Different types of laboratories are going to push for different levels of functionality, and the likelihood of having a common enough basis to justify product development is small. One way of approaching the problem is to provide a layered structure so that the database elements and major common functions are at the lower levels, and variations by lab type can be dealt with in an upper level structure. This is similar to the structure used in communication systems and graphics software, where widely used functionality is at the lower levels of the structure and application-specific functions are on the top. There is also the likelihood of an inability to keep the functionality of the products competitive with what's available from commercial vendors. Vendors have the dedicated staff and the drive to make sure their products are not only competitive, but also a jump ahead of the competition. Another question is to ask whether or not the IT people are up to a task of this magnitude. Do they have a track record of success in similar products? Do they have the project management skills necessary to take on a project of this magnitude and support it over the long term? They have to take into account the fact that this is not a one-shot product development effort, but a commitment to a long-term support and continuous development. How are your laboratories going to function while the project is underway? This is a project whose initial phases may take a year or two. What are your laboratories going to use while they're waiting for the software development to be completed? And how are they going to transition from whatever it is they're currently using in the short term to the solution provided by corporate IT? There are a number of personnel issues that need to be addressed in projects of this type, and the screen shows two key ones. The people working on the project are going to have very limited career paths. They're going to be working on a very interesting program, but the skills they're developing may not be translatable to other projects. As a result, those working on the project may see it as a career dead end. Another issue for management is finding people qualified to work on the project. By definition, since it's an internal project, there are no outside experts. Anyone brought into the company to work on it is going to have to be trained, and while they're being trained, they won't be productive developers. Anyone who leaves is going to take a lot of experience and knowledge with them, and that can't be replaced by outside hires or contractors. Now that we've covered that background material, let's take a look at the purchase process itself. The beginning of the purchase process starts with some basic housekeeping issues. The first is to make sure that all the organizational issues have been identified and resolved, at least as much as possible. If there are organizational problems, software systems' ability to address them are going to be limited to communications issues and data management and data transfers. But if there are issues with people working together cooperatively, software systems aren't going to fix those problems. They could make them a lot worse. The next step is to do an analysis of how the lab currently operates and how you believe it will operate once the systems you're looking at are put in place. This should include operations and workflow models with organizational relationships shown. This tells you where you are, where you're going, with the purchase process as an aid in getting there. With that effort in place, you should be able to detail exactly what the benefits of your project are going to offer. This will be very useful when you have to justify the expenditure. You should be able to show how the changes are going to improve your laboratory's operations, including the work it does in support with other groups. It should include elements such as sample throughput, improved screening procedures, the impact of additional capabilities, and any other features that help justify why you're going to be doing this work. Another way to address the same issue is to look at what will happen if you don't address these issues that you want to solve. Will you need to increase headcount, make more use of outsourcing, or be unable to meet the objectives in research and testing projects? We also have to look at the impact it will have on lab personnel. How do they feel about the changes and the impact it's going to have on their jobs? If it will adversely affect them, will they leave? Do they understand how the changes are going to benefit them and what the new methods of work are going to look like? Finally, we've got to look at training requirements. What education will be necessary to make sure that the people in the lab are fully qualified to work with the new systems and be productive? This is something you don't want to skip on. You can put the best systems in place that you can find, and if the people aren't educated to work with them, you won't have gained anything. When we look into generating product requirements, we need to think about whether or not one product is going to meet all of your needs, or if a combination of products will be necessary. For example, if you're looking at a laboratory execution system, should it be standalone or part of the laboratory information management system? Will you need a combination of scientific data management system together with an electronic laboratory notebook to meet the lab's needs? If you're dealing with multiple products, you need to set priorities and determine the sequence of implementations. Are there products you're looking at going to be mutually exclusive, or is there some overlap in their functionality? If there is overlap, which product has priorities, and how do you avoid having the overlaps generate conflicts? If the products are codependent, that is, they're going to be working together, are they available from the same vendor? This may ease integration issues. It's possible that the vendor may have done that work for you. You also have to take a look at whether or not you need to trade off necessary capabilities for ease of integration, and whether or not that's really a fair trade-off. As part of the product requirements, you also need to determine what product classes you're going to draw upon. By product classes, we mean things such as LIMS, ELN, and ELNs, and so on. This stuff we've covered already. Finally, do you want to deal with an all-in-one solution? This may be a suite of products developed by one vendor or an assembly of products put together by a third-party consulting firm. In either case, you need to be aware of compromises that are made in terms of functionality and capability, and whether or not it really is going to meet your needs. You also need to evaluate the risks and benefits of a single vendor solution. That includes the stability of the vendor and how long they've been in business and what their track record is, as well as their support policies. If the product you're looking at is put into service as a result of third-party integration efforts, will they continue to support it if any of the components needs to be upgraded or changed? This is a common failure point for many systems. The next section of the process addresses the issue of vendor evaluations. Everything we've been talking about so far really addresses two needs. The first are the considerations you need in planning a project. The second are the things that need to be covered to meet validation requirements for regulatory groups. Vendor evaluations is an important part of that second point. The points on the screen pretty much explain themselves, but we do want to spend a moment on the third bullet. Brochures are designed to put products in the best possible light, detailing what can be done and what could be done with additional effort. If there are particular elements in the brochure or web page that describes the products that are significant and are critical to your work, make sure they are carefully evaluated and tested. Be wary of things that imply something can be done with additional work, and find out how much work is needed, who's capable of doing it, and whether or not anyone has done it before. You may be the first. The bottom line is actually fairly simple. This is the vendor you want to work with because you're going to be putting your lab's capabilities on the line and on what the vendor delivers. Does the vendor support policies really match your needs? How does it complement the technical support you're going to be looking to put in place or already have in place? Have your support people review the vendor's policies and determine how well they fit their needs. Much of this depends on the qualifications that the IT support people have and their ability to understand and work in a laboratory environment. If they aren't trained in supporting lab work, they should be. Product demonstration should be a fairly significant part of your evaluations. Vendors always have standard demos that they want you to see. What's important is what you need to see. Prepare a script detailing the functionality that's important to you and what you want to see happen. Send it to them with enough time so they can prepare a response to it. Don't expect the vendor to go off and do specialized software development as part of the demo. They may show you some instruments integrated with their systems, but may not be willing to integrate a specific piece of equipment that you have, at least not for free. You need to be realistic about it. If you request features and the vendor can't demonstrate it, it may not exist. If the vendor makes excuses about not having enough time to implement something in the demonstration, ask when they can reschedule. What you need is hard evidence that the capabilities that are important to you are real. If the vendor can't meet your needs during the sales process, when they have a lot of motivation to do so, how well are they going to support you after the sale? Make sure that everyone who needs to see the demonstration can see it, and that includes support people. Their experience may allow them to see some things or question things that you may not notice. As soon as possible after the demonstration, bring everyone together and review what you've seen. If there are questions or concerns, contact the vendor and give them a chance to address them. Reference sites can be a critical component of the evaluation process. Ask the vendor for a list of sites that you can visit and people you can talk to see their products in a real-world situation. The vendor is going to give you that list that shows their products in the best possible light. That's just the way it goes. Make sure your group and those at the reference site understand exactly what it is you want to see, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Many vendors have users groups that meet during scientific conferences. Ask for an invitation to join them. Some sessions may be closed to people who are not customers, particularly if the vendor is dealing with significant issues. But try to get in, or if you need to, hang around the meeting area and talk to some of the people who are attending. The key is to get as much information as you can about products to make sure that you're confident that they're the right ones. This isn't just for your own purposes. When you bring a project before management for funding, they're going to ask you about these points. As part of the vendor evaluation, you also need to determine what the vendor can do to help you meet regulatory requirements. This can include parts of the validation process. They may have add-on components that help demonstrate the various phases of qualifications needed to complete the validation process. They may be an add-on kit that you have to purchase. They've been through it before and may be able to provide significant help. And finally, you need to be able to look at the ability to make changes to the system. This can depend upon the implementation technology that's being used. For example, it may be possible to make changes to a system that's supported within your laboratory running on your equipment, while making changes to web-based products may not be possible. It should also evaluate the ability to integrate any systems you're looking to purchase with the existing system in the laboratory or on the corporate network. There is considerable interest in integrating elements such as electronic laboratory notebooks and laboratory information management systems with corporate enterprise resource planning systems. This needs to be carefully considered, done very carefully, and be wary of things that may change, particularly on the ERP side. Choosing laboratory labs operations, the ability to do effective planning, and to make sure that all the people involved in the process had the education necessary to support the work. The next two sessions are going to focus on the technologies and products used in lab work. We've talked a lot about planning and talked about the systems themselves, and now we're going to move on to the reality. What do you have to work with, and what do you need to consider?